Hi everyone. In today's episode, we'll write the CSS for our application. So I hope that we'll take what we currently do have on the right-hand side and using CSS, we'll turn it into something that looks a little bit better. Okay, how do we start? I think, or what we should do is create a public not a file, a folder, a public folder. So a public folder is by convention something that will be treated as a place where we store all the code or all the files that directly go to our users when they somehow interact with our application, right? And these files, so the app file is not going there directly because this has the server-side logic into it. But currently we'll write some CSS and this will go here. And if we in the future write some JavaScript for this application, this would also go into here. Of course, the views also are client side. However, these are the EJS templates, right? So they are still rendered on the server side. And the HTML file is generated dynamically. Okay, so let's go out here. Let's create a new file here. Let's call it styles.css. Okay. So after we do that, we need to tell Express that it needs to use the public folder. So the way we can do that is say app.use. And here we can say express.static because it's a static file. And we can say dir name to get the current directory, and then plus, and then do /public. And this now Express will know that we have created this public folder here, and it will send the contents of the public file together with every request as an answer. Okay, so this is this. Now what we need to do is we of course need to go into our template because we need to register this CSS file. So let's go here. Let's go not head. Let's go link. And inside this link, let's go rel. Don't need the closing tag, of course. Let's go rel style sheet and href equals styles.css. Okay, let's save. Let's refresh our application. So for now, we do not get anything because our styles.css file is for now empty. However, if we now go into inspect and we go into sources, you can see that now we have the index file here, which is an HTML file, and we also have the styles.css file. And this is exactly the file that we have in the folder right here. Okay, so what we can do next is go to our styles file. And in the styles file, we can start to write some CSS. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to maybe change the font a little bit. And we will do that by selecting everything, also after and before, and then we'll say font family, and here it will be Open Sans. Yeah, you can use any font you want. And then if not, it will be sans serif. Okay, let's save that and let's refresh the application on the right hand side. And you can immediately see, that the changes were applied here. Okay, so what we can do next is maybe we go ahead and style our body a little bit. So what we want to do is we want to say display flex, and we want to say justify content. We want it to be center, and here should be a semicolon, of course, not a comma. Okay, let's save it and let's refresh our application. And now we can see that our content has been moved to the center, right? That's great, that's what we wanted. So let's now go ahead, and we wanted it, so this part, to be a card, right? Sort of a card. So let's now style Let's now style the card. But before we do that, let's quickly check if we have the card class here. It looks like we do. Okay, that's good. We do have the card class, therefore it should work. Therefore it should work for us. Okay, that's good. So let's go back here, and let's start to style the card class. In the card class, what we want to have is we want to have display flex once again. We want to align items, and we want to align items to the center for card, and we want to justify the content, and we want to justify the content to the center. Okay, let's refresh maybe. And currently it looks like meh, but let's change one more thing. Let's add flex direction column, and this should sort of bring it back how we want it to be. Justify content, and then maybe let's add some padding for one rem, and maybe let's add a border, so that we can see border. Let's just make it one pixel solid. Oops, border, and then a column, of course. One pixel solid. RGB, and then go 155, 155, 155. I have, by the way, I have these colors prepared a little bit on the side here, just so that it goes a little bit quicker. Okay, let's save it. Let's refresh it. Okay, now we have a nice border, and we have a little bit of padding. That's good. Okay, let's maybe create some border radius, 0.25 area. A border radius will just make the edges a little bit rounded. I think that looks a little bit nicer. Let's maybe go with a box shadow. Let's add some shadow. I want to make it 0 pixels, 5 pixels, and then make it here 0 RGB 0, 0, 0, and then 0.2. Okay, this should give us just a tiny little bit of shadow. Okay, we can see it here. I think that looks good. So let's style our header now and our body. So our header is the title and our body is the form plus the columns. Let's take a short look how we defined the classes here. And by the way, I've added in the meantime I've added a missing body tag. I've just realized that we had a missing body tag here. So let's take a short look how we want to style it. So here we have the card header, and then we have the card body. For now, let's not do anything to the card body, and let's maybe here we need another div, I think, just so that it contains all the columns. Where does this end? This is why now you see why the indentations are very important, because otherwise you can easily get lost inside your. And let's give it a class of card body calls. Okay, let's take the class and let's go to our CSS. Okay, so what you want to do now is, instead of display flex, you want to use a display of grid. And in this grid display, what we want to have is we want to have grid template columns, 1FR, 1FR. And the FR stands for like a fraction of available space. So if we just created 2 columns with 1 FR each, they will divide the available space exactly in half. So let's refresh now. And we now see that instead of one section being under the other, now what we have is the sections are nicely next to each other. Okay. Let's now go, let's add a column gap. Column gap, let's say 1 rem. And by the way, in general, in these tutorials, as I did also with the HTML and the JavaScript we wrote, I will not be explaining all the details. I think that details are really easy to find online. I mean, if you are wondering, like, what's the syntax for the shadow here, you can just very quickly look it up. I'm sure you will find it very, very easy. And there are a ton of tutorials that explain that in detail, so I will now not go into the details of everything that's going on here. Okay, we have the columns now styled. So let's maybe take a short look at how we want our to-do list, because currently it has these numbers, so let's try to change it a little bit. Okay, short look here how we defined it. So we have our card body to-do list. And I'm sure here it's named the same. No, here it does not have the class, so let's fix that. And let's copy the class name. And let's go into our CSS. Let's style it then a little bit. So what we want to do is say list style position inside. So this a little bit aligned it to the left hand side, and then let's say padding left 0. And this will bring it to the left hand side, which is good. Okay. We are done with it. Let's move on. And we can move on to our buttons. So we have many buttons here. We have this button, we have the delete buttons, and then we have the buttons which mark the to-dos as done. So let's currently first style all the buttons. So what we want to do is I like to remove the border for the buttons. Refresh. And what I like to do is, let's check quickly check if all the buttons we have the correct classes. Yeah, we have the button class here, and let's go down here. Let's check if we have, no, here we don't have. Let's here add a class of button, add a class of button, and here add a class of button. Okay, let's refresh here. And you can see that the border has been gone from all the buttons now. Okay, let's go back and let's make them also a little bit rounded, also 0.25 for REM. Let's make them inherit the background color. So now they are white by default. And let's make the cursor pointer. So now when you go ahead here, the cursor will turn into a nice pointer. And let's send the font weight to bold. Now all the signs here will be looking a little bit better. Okay, so for the generic styling of our buttons, that's it. Now let's go to the specific buttons, because we have a number of buttons here that we want to style. And we want this button to be different, so the add button to be different, the delete buttons to be different, and then we want these buttons also the tick marks to be different. Okay, let's start maybe with the delete buttons. And by the way, I have some colors prepared here on the side so that we don't have to spend time trying to prepare them. And what I like to use is I like to use the HSL, and you'll see why in a second. Because it's very easy then to create the hover effects or the on-click events, and to just change the color a little bit, and then it works just fine, right? Okay, so now we styled the delete buttons. Let's refresh, and nothing got refreshed because most likely we are missing the delete class on the buttons. Okay, here we have the delete, so let's say button delete class, and let's add the button delete class also right here. Delete. Let's not make a mistake. Okay, let's refresh, and now we can see that our delete buttons look much better currently. And let's also create the button dash button, as I said, button delete hover, and then the button delete focus. And once again, if you don't know what the pseudo classes mean, I highly encourage you to look it up. And here we just want to change the background color. And why I now like the HSL is because I can just change the last value here to a little bit lower number, and we have a nice, or we don't because I made a mistake here. And we now have a nice hover effect on our buttons. Okay, that's good. Then the delete button is done. And now let's go to the done button. So this is the done button, the tick mark. Let's start the same. Let's say button add. No button add, button done. Let's basically do the same thing, background color, and I will copy the colors that I have prepared here to the side. Color. So this will of course set the color of the font, and then the border. Also have the border here prepared. It's basically a very simple border. And let's save that, let's refresh. And currently nothing happened because of the same reason. We need to add the class to our buttons. So the button add is right here. Okay, let's refresh now. And we can see that our buttons currently do look a little bit better. Okay. Then let's also create the hover effects for the buttons. So button done hover and button done focus. Here, not a... Okay. And let's here do exactly the same thing. What I like to do is I like to now copy this part, and when someone hovers over it, it will be changed to something like a 48, so 20 points lower also. Let's refresh, and now when somebody hovers, it gets a little bit darker, and this is super simple with the HSL to do. And let's now move on to the last button. So button add, and the same story, background color. And I have some color here prepared. Maybe not 2 semicolons. Let's do also font color now. And let's do a border. Okay, let's save that. Again, nothing changed because we need to add our class to the button. Okay, and now we have a nice add button with no hover effect yet. Let's change that very quick. Oops. So, but the same way, button, oops, button add hover, I can't spell today, and button add focus. Okay, and here, let's do exactly the same thing. Let's paste the property here. Okay, let's save that, and we should now have a nice hover effect over all our buttons. That's cool. So what we can see currently is that our to-dos and the way the buttons are positioned is a little bit weird. So it's not very nice that they are on a different line. So let's move up here and let's style a little bit something that I think we call the to-do row. Let's check that twice. To-do row, exactly. So let's style the to-do row a little bit. So first off, let's also use a display of grid, and let's also use the grid template columns. And now let's say 1FR, 2rem, 2rem. So now the two on the right hand side which will be the buttons, will take 2 rem each, and then the rest of the space will be taken by the text itself. Let's refresh that, and we can already see that it looks much better. Okay, and let's say align items. So the align items center is important here because maybe for now it will not change that much. Yeah, it only made a slight change, but if we did not have that, and I would currently try to write a long to do here, we can see, or for now it doesn't like wrap into the next line, but if it will in the future and will make it to do so, then it would not be looking very nice, and the buttons would be not aligned. Let's remove the long to do, and we already saw with me adding the long to do that this is something we have to take care of in the future, right? That really it then wraps into the next lines. And let's maybe add some margin at the bottom, 0.5 rem, and maybe here what is not necessary is the margin for the last one. So let's say how is our parent called here? card body to-do list. Okay. And so let's go back to our styles and let's say dot card body to-do list and then pseudo class last child and say margin button 0 pixels so that the last child does not have a margin at the bottom. Okay, that's cool. Let's move on. Now let's maybe style our buttons a little bit. So the buttons, let's enclose them in an icon class. And let's set the width to 20 pixels, 20 pixels, and the height to the same thing, to the 20 pixels. Okay, let's save that. Oops, but not save right there. Refresh this and let's move on. Let's check out where would we add this icon class. And we want to add this icon class to our buttons, of course. Let's also make them an icon. Okay, let's refresh this. Oh, okay, they are a little bit smaller now. What's more important, they are the same. Okay, that's good. One thing that I don't really like here is that currently this row looks good. However, this row, because it only contains one button, is really missing out right here. So let's find this. So this is the to-do row. And let's maybe do a to-do row done. And here let's do a to-do row to-do. And this thing will be similar. However, okay, let's maybe do it a little bit different. Let's maybe create a to-do row class here, and then let's right here create this to-do row to-do, and it will, the only thing it will set is it will set the grid template columns, and this will not set it, and this will set the grid template columns, but it will be to the row done. Okay, and this will and here it will not, it will miss the last column, and now we only need to apply the correct classes. So okay, this is for the to do, so it's to the row to the row to do, and then it's to the row but done. Okay, let's refresh, and we can see that it somehow moved nicely together. Okay, what we can see currently is that it would maybe make sense to increase the column gap a little bit. Now it will be a little bit further apart. Maybe what would make also sense is that we set it here to 1.5 rem instead of 2, because I think 2 is a little bit too generous. Okay, let's refresh, and okay, it has come together nicely. Okay, I think we are pretty much done. Let's maybe now take a short look at this form here. And I think what we can do, or rather what we don't need currently, is we don't need this label. I will just remove it. So for me, it's kind of obvious that this is where you add the to-do. And let's maybe go into here and let's set the class for this form. Something like my form. Okay, and now we can style the form also. So let's come right here and say my form. And the my form, I'll just quickly check if everything is fine here. Okay, let's set the display on the form to a grid also. And let's do a grid template columns. And let's do 3 columns also, or 2 columns rather. And let's add a column gap. And I really like to use grid to styling forms. It's really, really nice. And then also set the width to 100%, so that it spans from left to right. And fantastic, we have it currently. Okay, and one more thing, maybe let's test what happens if somebody adds like a long to do here. Okay, so it spans, so it increases the size of our card. And that's what I would kind of like to avoid. Let's set a max width here of 500 pixels. Now you can set it to something else. And okay, that looks good. And now this is wrapping nicely in the line. Okay, and now you can see that why we like sort of center the buttons, right? Vertically inside the row. Okay, so that's good. Also, my form here is, let's maybe set actually a max width on my form so that it does not really take the whole space. Let's set it to like 300 pixels. Okay, that's fine. But now what we need to do is we need to add something for the body because currently it's not very centered. So let's go up here where we have card body. And let's say flex. Let's begin with display flex. Let's save, let's refresh. This of course messed up our stuff. Let's say flex direction column. Okay, and let's say justify content center. And let's say align items center. And now our form is centered. Okay, that's good, that's good. That's good, good, good. Okay. Now, currently, one more thing we should add. So currently, if you take a short look here, this is not very responsive. I mean, it is responsive so that the lines kind of shrink here, but what could happen, or what's actually very common in these kind of applications, is that if you open this on a mobile screen, right, which we kind of can simulate here in the browser, the columns would, instead of being next to each other, would go down, sort of to the basic that we had. And we can achieve that very easily if we just write a media query. So I like to put the media queries at the end. So let's say media, and let's then say max width. So if the max width of our display is smaller, then what we want to do is to the card body calls class, we want to add, or we want to change the grid template columns property to be only 1. So that was super simple. And now actually you can see, because our display currently it's 625. Let's try to set it up. That's not the right parameter, of course. If we now change it to 800, right? You can see now we have 2 columns, and if we change it to 600, now you can see that we have 1 column back again. Okay, so that's it for our CSS. I think we have made a lot of changes. We've made, I think, a good progress after this episode, and we are, I think, getting ready to do our production deployment, because I would consider now that the minimum that we need to achieve for our application has been achieved. So you can already add the to-dos, you can already delete them, you can already mark them as done, right? So you can delete it. Maybe we can we can also add a new to-do, right? You can mark as something as done, and you can also delete it from the done section. Now I think of it and take a look at it, this looks kind of ugly, so it would be much better if this was aligned to the left-hand side. So let's try to maybe change that. And doing this is also super simple. We need to go down to our media query, we need to say card body, and inside this card body, instead of align items center, we need to say align items baseline. And this is it. This works just fine. One more thing that looks kind of ugly in my opinion is that these buttons right here are so close to the text here and not on the right, aligned to the right hand side. So if you go in here, let's check out how it looks like, because yeah, exactly. So here our body is not, so there to the right hand side of our card body calls. So let's currently make the card body calls take up 100% of the available space, so 100% of the parent, and currently they went to the right hand side, and that works perfect. Let's for now check if we did not mix anything up and if it did not break our very wide screen support, and it didn't, or not very wide, a standard with screen support, and the mobile also looks fine. Okay, so I would consider now the CSS finished and all the features that we need for applications finished. So in the next episode, we will deploy our application to a real server. So we will commission our server, we will configure it, we'll make the deployment, and then perhaps in some next episode, we will configure our custom domain for it. But don't worry, there are definitely still many features to come to this application. Something I definitely want to do is I definitely want to write tests, because currently we do not write any tests, and that's usually not what you want to do, because when you'll be adding features, especially a little bit more complicated ones that we've currently done, for example, something like the session and user authentication and user login and registration, this can very easily break your application. So we want to make sure that all your features that you have implemented still work fine. And for our small application, just clicking around may be enough, because the number of features that we have is not very high. However, if you have a more complex applications, you always want to have some sort of test that you want to run, and that proves that all the features do work still after you have applied your changes. But this is all still to come. For now, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.